When it comes to the places the oak comes from, we hear French oak a lot.
Yeah.
I know of American oak. Tell me more about sort of the origins of the oak that's used within Oregon and around the world.
Yeah. So I'll start with Oregon. Oregon, there's some kind of, I would say, producers that are really exploring what it's like to use white oak here in Oregon. I think they're doing some really interesting stuff. The body of work is relatively small at this point, but there's some really good wines and barrels coming out of Oregon, but in very, very small quantities. Broadly speaking, for Oregon, I think because we predominantly produce Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, those varietals go really well with French oak, because French oak can supply tannins, but it's also not bearing or overpowering. So France is a huge source of oak. The eastern side of Europe, so primarily Hungary and Ukraine, different regions like that, they can supply oak. And then we have oak coming from here in the United States, primarily Minnesota, Virginia, I think Wisconsin, a few other states and different forests. You can find oak here in America as well. And so they all tend to lead into they impart different flavors. And so for California, it's much easier to make a Cab Franc or heavier red varietals with, I tend to think, and I think the general consensus is with American oak or Hungarian oak. It does a little bit more vanilla bean, a little bit heavier, and it can be a little bit more aggressive with the tannin sometimes. But it can also be kind of sweetening and smoothing of the palate at the same time. It kind of depends. Versus French, it's tighter grain, it's different soils, different growing conditions, and those barrels tend to, obviously there's Bordeaux, but for what we work with here in Oregon, with Pinot, we source primarily from a central region of France, and just because it seems to pair with Pinot Noir, which central region of France, and so that's kind of a little bit of a shotgun approach to how I view oak more broadly. So here for us, as a micro producer in Oregon, focusing on Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, we are exclusively working with French oak. And versus if I was making some Cab down in California, I no doubt would be exploring American and French oak combination thereof, maybe 100% American oak, just based on what style I was going for. So it can really vary, but for here in Oregon, with the varietals at least that seem to dominate this market, it's mostly French oak.
Gotcha.